Hi, John, Professor Dark.
No,
it's such a pleasure to sit down with you and
Absolutely.
catch up with you and see you again.
Well, that's what the annual meeting is all about.
Of
meeting the family, meeting the old friends.
Of course it is.
You and I were president, in a different decade almost. It feels like a different century almost.
It has been. I remember I was president in 2008, which would put us at about 16 years ago.
Yeah, well,
almost.
I was a couple of years after.
After that.
After you.
Things have changed, haven't they, John?
They're getting changed. Yes, the society certainly has changed.
Yeah, certainly in a positive way, though.
Yes, the new chief executive has made a huge impact.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited with the energy, the level of enthusiasm at this meeting, and it just gives me great pleasure to see that growth in the society.
Although it's lost some of the traditions. I was disturbed, for instance, that the Caves session is a parallel session now. And we always used to regard the Caves as the epitome of what our younger trainees should aim for.
Maybe you should tell them something about
I've mentioned
Caves.
it to the Philip Caves was an important person back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And he died very young,
Yeah.
age of 37.
Yeah.
We had the Caves Award, which was for the young researcher presenting his work here at the meeting.
Yes, and if I may just add to that, Philip Caves at Stanford is someone who really introduced the percutaneous biotome, with which we were able to actually do post-transplant surveillance for hearts in many ways.
And it was an example of a surgeon working in collaboration with a pathologist to develop the grading of the Billingham grade.
At that time with Margaret Billingham, who not only was a past president, but also a pioneer for ISHLT.
But that's a good example, because the ISHLT brings people together.
Yeah.
And the Caves Billingham combination is a good example of not just working in isolated silos, but working along with other members of the team.
You know, that's such a brilliant thing that you're saying, John, because perhaps we've lost that context of history in today's day and age. And I wonder if you would say something to that effect on what does history of a society like ours actually mean for the next generation of individuals?
Well, I think it's a way of seeing what's come before in terms of how people have made advances.
Yes.
You know, that the very early years of cardiac transplantation before we were around were donned by the fact that immunosuppression wasn't very good, and then cyclosporin arrived.
Exactly.
And the thing took off.
Yeah.
And people realized very quickly how important that was. Terence English in the UK, working closely with Roy Kahn, started, and Magdi Yaqub started the programs there, and there were analogous figures in the US and in Europe. Claude Cabral, for instance,
of course,
were all working at the same time and learning from each other.
Yeah. So it's such a good way of introducing this conversation with the fact that history or the past always informs our present, and the present always helps inform the creation of our future. And that's the continuity of this society.
That sounds like the sort of quote I ought to write down and have on a slide for some future use. So, Mandeep, just thinking about the practice today. What innovations have we taken for granted? What innovations have we just absorbed without really appreciating the size of the advance that they would make?
Well, this society developed as a means to share anecdotal information and bring anecdotal information to the patient's bedside and inform the scalability of therapies with both heart transplantation initially and then lung transplantation.
Yes.
That was the essence of this society, which is also why this society now, one would say, is potentially misnamed the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation, since there have been other innovations that have now become important in this field for patients. Right?
They do make the point that the mechanical support, pulmonary hypertension are all part of its end stage dealing with
Exactly.
end-stage failure, regardless of the cause and slightly regardless of the mechanism of dealing with it. And I know you've invested a huge amount of time and effort into alternatives for transplantation.
Yeah. So I think the point is that this society was developed based on two treatments, has now scaled itself into a society for diseases, not just
Yes.
for therapy. And now ISHLT stands for enhancing our understanding of advanced heart and lung disease. And in that context, several innovations, particularly changing from biology to technology, has probably been one of the most important transformative changes in the society.
Expand on that, this biology to technology.
well-
Sounds like another quote I should have on a slide.
So what I mean by biology to technology is that we focused on the biology of transplantation, the immunology of transplantation, the pathology of transplantation, immunosuppression with medications. And it wasn't until we began to think about alternatives to transplantation, recognizing how scarce that resource was and only available for a few, that we began to not only think about scalability with using engineering and technology to bring options either as a bridge to people who were waiting, or now as an alternative.
That's a medical perception, whereas the surgeons have always been closer to the technology because the technology was an essential part of what we did. The heart-lung machine in particular, evolving into ECMO, evolving into mechanical support devices. The intraballoon pump was around before either of us were working really, and as you know, that's an example of technology. So I think the surgeons have been closer to that end of it,
no
and the immunosuppression. You know, the T cell. You ask a surgeon what a T cell is, and there's a blank expression comes over his face.
Yeah. I think surgeons were always participants in both biology and technology in the hospital setting or in the operation theater. But now we have people miraculously walking out of the hospital, living very healthy, high quality lives without biological hearts, but with technological hearts that are made of titanium. And that itself is a major innovation, I think, in this field.
And is an example, it illustrates that the heart is really just a dumb pump, whereas the lung is a complicated, sophisticated, multicellular organism.
So of course, John, the reason you're saying that is because you are more tilted towards lungs.
Indeed.
And I am, of course, only tilted towards hearts and less so towards lungs. The only thing I would say is that you need two of those to survive, and we need just one heart.
You probably take the attitude that the lung is just there as a convenient cushion to keep the heart in place.
Isn't that true?
Whereas we would say the heart is just a means of connecting the lungs together and stopping them drifting away from each other.
That's so well said.
So maybe that's where we end.
So well said, John. You're absolutely right. You know, John, one of the real value propositions of ISHLT has always been the relational component with colleagues, but also with mentors.
Yes.
ISHLT has not only allowed us to reconnect with some of our mentors, but also to find new ones. What would you think in your life and in the great trajectory academically that you've enjoyed would be some people who you would qualify as your most deepest mentors?
I like to put this in a sense of luck.
Okay.
And luck, there's a great quote about luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Of course.
You can put that on a slide.
That is.
And by chance, I ended up working with Professor Samagdi Yaku as a senior resident.
I see.
And there were two senior residents, and the other one didn't like flying, and I loved going in the helicopter.
Oh.
So flying in the helicopter. So I was sent out on the retrievals. And then by chance, I picked up an opportunity to go to Toronto, where Joel Cooper had just done the first and second successful lung transplants. And I came back to the UK as a guy who could do cardiac transplantation, who'd seen lung transplants, and was almost. And when an opportunity arose to go into position to follow those, it was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And then further future colleagues continued to contribute to that, and we continued to interact with them.
Yeah. I would
and
say
yourself, you have a parallel story.
But my story might be a little different than yours. I grew up thinking I had no other opportunity but to work in the field of heart transplantation, and you'd say, how so? And that's because of my birth. I was actually born at the same time as the first heart transplant was being performed at the Grooterschuur Hospital in Cape Town. When Christian Barnard performed that. So I was always intrigued by that all my life. And when I moved to the United States, and the first time I began to see patients with heart transplantation was all the stimulation and all the inspiration I needed. As many cardiologists, John, I came to the United States to want to be an interventional cardiologist. And to start putting catheters in people and treat coronary disease and valvular heart disease. And it turned out for me that that was not to be. About 10 months into my training, as I began to encounter heart transplantation, I was so inspired by my colleagues who were caring for them. And I realized that all of this episodic treatment that we were providing and compartmentalized treatment in cardiovascular medicine at that time point was just very dissatisfying. And very satisfying to me was this village approach to caring for patients.
Yes.
And I very much enjoyed that aspect and was drawn to heart transplantation. Of course, fast forward to now, I have some incredible mentors. If I were to name some, Dr. Eugene Braunwald, who I've had the good fortune of knowing personally for over a decade now, and I've learned so much in the way how we should apply intellectualism in academic medicine to a large extent from him. But I will tell you, John, that some of my loveliest and most valuable and closest mentors arose after I joined the society. And it was people like yourself, people like John Kabashigawa, people who are other past presidents, this whole Sharon Hunt.
And they're still here.
They're all here.
Yes.
And you look at these wonderful people who were at the time of inception of the field, like someone like Sharon, an incredible, iconic person in our field, as the living example of one of the first cardiologists in heart transplantation. So when you look up to people like that, you continually feel inspired to excel and to do good things, which is what this society has collaboratively brought for me.
But having contact with those people also gives us an opportunity to introduce our juniors, to arrange rotations, positions, training opportunities.
I think that one of the greatest opportunities that ISHLT has provided is first to learn who the incredibly rising young stars are. And I can say that in my own context. When I first joined the society, I was a fellow in training. And I remember delivering my first talk at ISHLT in front of about 1,000 people. Wow. And literally at that time, John, my mouth would dry up.
I can't believe that.
But fast forward to now I'm always consistently looking for people who are our next generation leaders. And this is the place where we find them cohesively. And it is our duty to identify them, to help foster them, and to have them know that we exist to help, because it is through their medium that this society and the field will continue to grow.
Yes. I couldn't agree more about that.
Yes.
So in terms of what the society is offering our fellows, our trainees we bring with us, how do you categorize? How do you see what they should be doing here, who they should be talking to, where they should be going after they leave Prague?
So I think that what you're really reflecting on, John, is the opportunity that is being provided by this forum of having the past, present, and future all in one place in a wonderful location. I would just say that advice to young fellows, young faculty members, trainees, diverse members of the team is to not hesitate to reach out to the people who are here.
Yes.
We, in fact, would welcome that. We want people to come to us. We want people to engage with us, and that we look forward to that.
It's a great feeling. Somebody, do you remember me? I was.
Yeah.
And maybe I wanted to do and who should I talk?
Yes.
And that is that's one of the great bits when you're standing waiting for coffee.
Exactly. And it's not. One should not hesitate to reach out to anyone, because any one of us can reconnect them to others.
Yes.
And that's what networking is all about.
Yes.
So I would say they should not hesitate to reach out. That's number one. Number two is, I would say they should not hesitate to volunteer. We're looking for doers and not talkers. And the way in which many of us have grown in this society was really by looking up to our peers, our mentors, but also by doing things in a voluntary role for this society.
Absolutely. And I think the society needs to appreciate that it's the whole population.
Yes.
I was disturbed during the beginning of the opening session this morning that all of the featured young investigators were American. And if you look at the various professional groups, they are dominated by North American names.
Yes.
And we really need, from my point of view as a European, I like to think of myself as a European, to make sure that they put themselves forward, that they get involved, because they will then build those same links that you and I have had over all these years.
So I think that is a really critical issue. You know, for now the 30 plus years that I've been involved with this society, as have you, John, we have always struggled with making sure that the international in the name ISHLT is always front and center stage. But we have not always done well with that, and there are many challenges with that. And I wonder, you know, I do come from the North American continent, and the issue over there is that we take certain things for granted. We take our ability to network and grow and achieve grantsmanship and other things for granted because we have systems in place that promulgate that. I wonder what solutions or suggestions you might have, not for the society, but for the geographically diverse areas outside North America or outside even Europe or the UK, on how they can in fact grow into this matrix of a very diverse and highly politically charged environment.
I think the communication is the key thing, and in some ways the online meeting has become an important avenue for keeping people involved without having to travel thousands of miles, which is going to be increasingly frowned upon and expensive, particularly for lower income countries. But to incorporate them into the online community. And the journal is doing a good job. I mean, you did a wonderful job with the journal. You really promoted it up to the highest level. The successive editors are doing the same.
Well, you had a lot to do with that. You were one of our senior editors.
The ISHLT Open, you know, run by edited by European, is a really important avenue to get everybody together. We should probably be grateful that we're stuck with speaking English, but you know, we need to maintain all these, and even not having the native language is going to become less and less of a problem.
Yeah. No, I have to say that I was always struggling with this issue of internationality and how to make sure that it was balanced and that everyone had an opportunity who wished to have an opportunity. And I'm actually gratified that the society has taken a direction to try and do better in that
Yes.
regard.
Yes.
And I think, I'm sure you would agree with that you're seeing a much more diverse group of people
We are indeed.
at this meeting.
We are indeed.
The Asia Pacific rim is extremely strongly and well represented now. The society has created systems in place to encourage that by even improving tiers of membership, for example.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there are now very clear and very important suggestions and actual tactics that have been in place to improve the collegiality of people from outside North America, outside of the UK, at program committees and involvements.
And the ISHLT Foundation is playing a really important
key role
in supporting a whole range of people from all around the world.
Yeah. So I am personally very, very gratified to see that the society is making intentional headways in the right direction in promoting this
But we need
aspect.
to keep prompting them.
Absolutely.
We cannot relax. Based in Dallas or Chicago, we need to keep reminding them that we are an international
And I think as
society.
past presidents, it's our job to keep that check
Yes.
on our
Yes.
current leadership,
Yes.
to not forget what's
Yes.
important.
Yes, that's certainly true.
So John, I want to know from you, not knowing much about lung, as you might imagine, what you would think would be the most pivotal future advances in this area. Let's look at, say, a short frame time of about 10 years from now. What do you think?
You maybe need to be more imaginative than 10 years, but certainly. So the xeno for the lung seems to be an insoluble problem.
Okay.
We've got colleagues working on that who are
Yeah.
struggling. Growing lungs from stem cells
Yes.
is a really very exciting area.
Mm.
And I think maybe a little bit more than 10 years, but that will solve a huge range of problems. In the interim, I think the technology of lung recovery is advancing very rapidly and is very excited. And we've come to realize that although the lung is a complex and beautiful organ, it has endless option for recovery.
Yes. Yes.
And I suspect there are some analogies there with the heart, wouldn't you
Yeah,
think?
there certainly are. I think that we were very excited about gene-edited xenogenic transplantation for hearts, and the first two such events have occurred and have taught us that the immunological barriers, despite gene editing, are still quite challenging. So one has to then look at a different way, and I think that we currently only accept about a third of hearts that are offered to us for transplantation. And we do so because we are under a strict regulatory framework to achieve certain outcomes.
In all countries.
And I think, in all countries, and I think that one of the future immediate opportunities are to create a bit of a concession on how much life prolongation could occur by using hearts that would otherwise be discarded, and perhaps even creating an opportunity for repairing those hearts.
Yes.
Even as we are looking into those paradigm shifts, I think that another opportunity is to continually improve the experience of technology for durable cardiac support.
Yes, yes.
And I think we now have wonderful technology with the new left ventricular assist devices that are currently available to give us median survivals for those patients who are denied transplantation of well over 5 years. And these are patients who would otherwise die within a year.
Yeah.
And so we've already made great inroads, but we can do better. And that's why I think technology will be really important, as will be artificial intelligence, in my opinion, in helping us think through those paradigms of risk stratification, as well as processes of patient management, which are difficult for us to compute in prediction from small studies, which may actually be an opportunity into the future.
And we need to get away from the transplant team's obsession with 30-day survival
Yes.
to looking into the overall umbrella
Yes.
of what can be achieved. And you know, if you've got a big population of people who are just not being transplanted at all, and the mechanical devices are advancing all the time, but they're still a little bit short. then the option of giving those people a chance of a heart transplant, even though it's not an ideal organ from a young, fit donor, is important. And then, you know, we've got all the options for and you and I both have an intrinsic interest in senescence and how we can diminish it. The use of senolytics is a very exciting potential.
It's a very exciting area, and I think what I'm most excited with is that all of these opportunities into the future are allowing us to focus on net prolongation of life for our patients. So now, instead of a single directional fork in the road, oh, you can get a transplant, or you can get this, we're now able to give them multiple options to prolong their life, to have much more functional and high quality lives into the future. So I think the future is extraordinarily bright.
And they set with other things, you know, the cystic fibrosis gene medications, gene-specific medications have altered dramatically the fate of that subset of patients, and it remains under the umbrella of the ISHLT, which continues to cover this whole sphere.
Perhaps the most important thing I would say is that if the reason why we exist were to go away academically, that would perhaps be the most important improvement in science in our lifetimes, which is prevention. And I am particularly excited about CRISPR-Cas technology. We have a lot to learn, but you have this vaccine-like drugs now, and you have once and done drugs that we might in fact be able to use for prevention of heart disease and perhaps prevention of lung disease. So on that note, I know the future is extraordinarily great, but it's been fantastic chatting with you, John, as it always is, interacting with you. And what a delight to see you again.
I'll see you next year in Boston.
Absolutely, you will.